from things like that. In the same way, you can sometimes even tell when people are making it up. Not to pick too harshly on any one other group, but the one that immediately springs to mind for me is Mormons, right? Has anyone ever read the Book of Mormon? I know a couple people have, my wife in particular. One of the things you notice when you read through the Book of Mormon is that it was not, the language is not eloquent. It's a pastiche imitation of King James. But it's not actually King James. It's King James like somebody who was not very good at imitating things would write an imitation of King James. So you can actually look at it, read it, see what they're trying to sound like, and go, but that's not what it is. This must be later because you're doing a bad job. And this sort of linguistic thing, right, we can see much more easily in our own language than English. There are people that study, of course, the ancient Hebrew and can do that with the Hebrew phrasing. Look and read the Psalms in the Hebrew that they have and go, this one must be earlier. The way that it's written, the kind of language that's being used, the way it's being phrased, puts it earlier in time, and this one comes later. Again, though, not to spend too much time on this, getting back to what I was saying, we don't really have any information about the music. We could have more recent words set to an early tune from Asaph, right? In the same way that we could, you take Beethoven, right? Beethoven's Ode to Joy, right? The original German words to that are probably much of their time and place, but if we write modern English words to go with that tune, well, we could be seriously confusing some future musical historian by looking at this and they're thinking, look, this music is clearly from the 1700s, but these English words, that's 20th century. What's going on here? Something is off. Well, the explanation's simple. We just wrote different words to an old piece of music. So, again, there's a lot of time spent to say that, the dating is a little uncertain, it's a little bit iffy, but these are the sorts of things that they base this on. The general belief about this psalm is that it has a later date and that it is written by someone more contemporary to the events or close to the time of the destruction of the northern kingdom. So, all right. Verse 2 mentions several tribes north of Jerusalem. We have Manasseh, Ephraim, and Benjamin, excuse me, mentioned specifically for God to save. So they may stand in for Israel as a whole. They may stand in for Israel of the northern kingdom. There's an interesting metaphor here. I like this one, to stir. It speaks of God stirring himself in order to save his people. The idea being, of course, here that God is not absent, right? That his power is more what we might think of as dormant rather than absent. That he is not far away. He is not simply acting on behalf. I'm going to look at this so I can run more than one slide in front of myself here at the same time. He is not missing or is not forgotten them, but he is simply not acting on behalf of Israel. And this is a request. You can think of it as if you have something where you have a liquid where something in it within it settles to the bottom and having to stir it up. It's not that it's gone, but it's simply not present throughout. And the stirring is a rousing or a coming to life in a sense. This is a request for God to do as he's in fact promised in some sense to do. We'll get into this. 3 is similarly asking for his face to shine. This is another one of those metaphors, I think, of the similar type, that it is not, again, that he is not present, that he is absent or is non-existent, but rather that he is not choosing at this moment to favor Israel. For some reason, this one is just linguistically, it really strikes me. The idea that he has turned his face away, or he is not giving them the benefit of his attention, maybe, by looking at them. English uses this word to mean that. Countenance is both a noun meaning one's face or an expression, and also to give permission to or to allow, right? You can countenance behavior, meaning that you approve of it or you are saying that it is okay. And this kind of idea is frequent in biblical metaphor, right? That God's face will be turned towards them, or God's face will shine on them. The idea that not is he simply there, but that he has his attention and his approval directed at them. For me, again, maybe that's just me and the way it strikes me, but it's such a powerful kind of metaphor that I really, really enjoy. Then we have one of burning here. If roused, he has been angry with Israel. This is in verse 4. We have the word smoke, is what it literally is. Some translations give smolder or perhaps even burn. Why would he be angry, though, with the prayers of his people? Because it's not specifically against them in verse 4. It says that his anger is with their prayers. Why is he angry with prayers? Is that not what he wants?
Well, even when Christ was roaming the earth, one of his biggest needs was really insincerity, just following the rules. God had laid out for the Jews what his expectations were, and he had a list of rules.
Mm-hmm.
And I think over time, their religion became following the rules, not love for God.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Insincerity of them. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. There's probably an element of hypocrisy that goes along with it too, right? Well, no. And I think they're both they're slightly different, but I think they're both applicable. Yeah. Yeah. They are not sincere because they are being hypocritical, right? They go hand in hand. Yeah. And so he becomes angry that they are using these prayers as a kind of cynical ploy, right? Viewing God as like what would you say, like a cosmic vending machine, as it were, right? You put enough prayers in and you get the things out that you want. A kind of a quid pro quo exchange with God.
Well, and that you pray because you feel you have to, not because you want to.
Sure.
It's some kind of soul.
Yeah, I would, and I think I know where you're going with this. I would say that sometimes even praying just because you have to is still better than not praying, right? But it goes to that motivation that one has, right? That if I am praying to God out of some sense of obligation, let me put this a different way. It is not every single morning of my life that I get up and feel excited about doing the things I have to do that day. Right? Going to work. Is everybody always excited about the prospect of going to work? Is everybody always excited at the prospect of coming to church? Right? You don't sleep well, forget to make the coffee, the kids are being cranky. Like, there's all sorts of things that make you go, I don't want to do this right now. I am not feeling excited and enthusiastic about this. And there are moments then when that sense of obligation and duty can carry us through. I think it's useful, right? Knowing that I need to do something even if I don't always want to do it. But you're right that the ultimate goal, right, what we are striving towards, is doing these things out of a desire to please God and because we know they're right. Not because we're going to get something from it, not for our own benefit, not because, it's not always because I feel like I have to, right? But sometimes that can carry you over. I think of there's the man in the Gospels, right? That says, Jesus tells him that that what he's asking for will be done if he has believes that it will be done. And he says, I do believe. Help thou my unbelief. Help me with my unbelief.
Well, even when you look at Job, when God allowed Satan to affect his life, and everything got taken away, all of his buddies were pretty certain that he which is good. But if they watch us and they don't see it in other facets of our life, then they might think, well, when I'm an adult, gotta pray over the food, not because we're asking for blessing, but that's one of the rules. And I think church can be the same thing.
Sure, sure. We can make these rules and these obligations out of things. And again, I think that the obligation and duty has its place, right? That it helps us over those points where we don't want to do things or we don't have enthusiasm for things, right? It can help us through those, but it cannot be the thing that sustains us all the time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I just want to share a quote that I think applies
Please.
to this. It says, "When you are discouraged, it's easy to feel alone and fall into a pity party. What you need to do is get into your Bible, and you may think, I don't feel like it. So what does that mean? Do it anyway. Do it out of discipline until you feel like it. And in the process of doing it in obedience to the Lord, you will discover when you take the step of faith to do what you know you need to do, your feelings all begin to change."
Yeah, yeah. We can start from a place of desiring at least to have, in some sense, the desire to do it, right? I think of it as I'm spending way too much time on this, but that's okay. The people don't want to write books. People want to have written a book, right? Everybody wants to be an author, but nobody wants to write a book. Because sitting down and writing a book and actually putting words on paper is really hard. And it's difficult, and you have to tear things up, and you have to start over. But what we would like is we would like to just jump to the end, right? We would like to be the people that are full of faith. We would like to be the people that are always studying our Bibles. But the part that we really don't like, and it's a little bit hard to get started without that discipline and sense of obligation and duty, is to actually sit down and do these things, right? Sometimes you need that. I mean, this is what school is like, right? Like, how do you learn those multiplication tables unless somebody stands over you and is like, you need to run through them again. Run through them again. I know you're excited about doing this for the 5th time today, but time to do them again. And that sense of duty and obligation, when we focus into it, can produce good results. Anyways, that's way too long with this. Verse 4, and I'm okay. Well, 5 and 6 are telling us that he has decreed their suffering, essentially, at the hands of their enemies at this point. That he is angry with their prayers. They have not been sincere. They are asking for God to do things despite their own disobedience and unfaithfulness. And as a result of their own intransigence, their suffering has been allowed. This is something that God is permitting in order to impose discipline on them. They are being fed with tears. They are having to drink them, and they are a source of mockery to everyone round about. This is an acknowledgement by the psalmist that this is in fact deserved. They have not been treated unfairly. That God has done this, and in fact, he is justified in doing so. He has been angry with their prayers. He has been angry with their behavior, which has not been what it ought to be. Both 4 and 7 refer to the God of hosts. Why would they have a repeated reference to the God of hosts? What could that signify? This is one of those linguistic clues that we were kind of talking about earlier. I think it speaks to the kind of peril they were facing. Who do they need to save them? The God of the armies, the hosts. That they were facing military invasion. This is not a plague. They don't need God to heal them. This is an opposing force, an enemy that has attacked, and they need God's defense. This is one of those reasons that people put this the dating close to the time of the Assyrians and the Assyrian invasion, because of the need for military intervention, as it were, for God to intervene on their behalf militarily. And we see that kind of in this repeated reference to God of hosts, God of the army, God of the defender of his people. 11 and then through 8 rehearse what God has done to establish them as a nation. So they have a description of their danger, something of their peril, and then we have a pause or an interlude here in the middle of the psalm, speaking of what God has done to establish Israel. Why put that here? Why, at this point in the psalm, go back and, God doesn't need a history lesson, right, if this is a petition to God. This is common knowledge, or should be, for everyone who lives in Israel. Why make this part of this psalm? What's the point? Yeah.
I kind of take this as a whole as you come on through it. It's building up, saying, this is what you did for your people. You pulled us out. You built us as a nation. You spread us far and wide. And now we messed up, and now this is what's happening to us. You're allowing them to pluck away our riches. You're allowing them to take away stuff from us. And we're being punished.
Yeah. It provides a contrast, right, between their circumstances now and what God has done in the past. And it provides an illustration as they petition God for help for what they need for him to continue to do, right? To establish, to protect, to defend the nation that God himself set up, right? They have a not unreasonable expectation, right? God is a being that keeps his commitments. He does what he says. He does not lie. And if he has said that he is going to establish Israel and keep these promises that he has made, these covenants he has established, right, then a reference to this, what has become before, is perfectly in line with what it is that they are asking for him to do now. He has established Israel. He brought them out of Egypt, right? They go through the list. Exodus, the conquest of the land, expansion, flourishing. We'll get to that question about the river in just a second. But he has done this for them in the past, and so bringing this up as a part of the request for what he's to do now fits in with what they are asking for him to do and what they want. We can still table that thing about the river. What does this mean, though, for the fact that we know that the northern kingdom is not preserved? The Assyrians do destroy it and scatter the people. God has made a promise. I know this is an easy question to just reflexively answer no, but does this mean God has failed to keep his promise? Certainly, there were consequences that were inherent with these covenants, that they needed to continue to follow and obey him, or they would suffer consequences.
Well, and ultimately, because of the split in the kingdom, it wasn't allowed that they totally defeated and dispersed and killed off that line from Israel.
Right.
They did take the north, but
Yeah, no, you're perfectly right that the covenants that God established and the promises he made continued to be kept, even though the 10 northern tribes, the northern kingdom, were, in some sense, gone, destroyed, taken away. What was the promise that God made to Abraham?
that his seed would lead ultimately to the cross.
Yeah, that he would be, his descendants would be numberless, and that the entire world would be blessed through him and his descendants, which is in fact what comes to pass, right? That we are all of us in this room who are believers in Christ, considered to be Abraham's children, adopted perhaps, but nonetheless descendants of his. And that all of our lives, and indeed the whole world, has been blessed immeasurably by the coming of Christ and what he does. Yeah.
The people would have known by this time.
Would have known.
Would have known
yeah, yeah.
I mean, this is an ebb and flow all the way back to Abraham. I mean, he had the most dysfunctional family that you could possibly have.
It's pretty bad, yeah.
And they lived through it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a theme throughout the Old Testament, throughout the Psalms, right? That the people should know better, right? They should understand who God is and what His promises mean and what they are supposed to be doing, and yet, and yet they continue to turn away, fall away, disobey. They're punished and they have to repent. Yeah. I mean, the lesson there. I mean, it was easy as a child and as a young man to think, boy, I'm glad I'm not like that. But, the real lesson is, of course, is that I am. I'm not any, more of a special human being than any of them were. And the same temptations reside for me to turn away from God and to seek my own way, despite knowing all the wonderful things that God has done and has promised to do for me. I need to use that as a warning, as an alert to help me, because, yeah, we're all prey to the same things. There's an element of the deep roots that are being established that speaks to the promises of permanence, right? That they are making a reference here. There's a strong continued metaphor for something that is growing, a vine being brought out of Egypt. There's a reference later, we're probably not going to get to it based on the speed that I move at, about a branch, depending on your translation. Some refer to it as a son, depending on, again, what your translator thought. This idea of something that is growing, something that is alive and that has put down roots in order to be a permanent fixture. But before we move past it too fast, what is the river that is mentioned here? In verse 11. Yes, sir?
It must be the Jordan.
Must be the Jordan. Why is it must be the Jordan?
Israel conflict country, all the way from the Mediterranean to the Jordan.
That's true. It was from the Mediterranean to the Jordan. There's a little bit on the other side of the Jordan that they occupied as well. There were tribes on both sides. That is an easy and common sense way to think about that, yeah. But there's most translators and commentators disagree. They think it means something else. Does anybody have a footnote? I bet you do. Somebody's got a footnote. Yeah?
Mine puts down the river as
The Euphrates River. Where's the Euphrates? Anybody? I should have a map, but I didn't have a map. Geography of the Middle East. Anybody know where the Euphrates is? It's in Iraq, right? So you have Israel, modern-day Israel. I guess I should turn around. So on the left, and then you have the River Jordan and the country of Jordan next. And then on the other side of that country of Jordan, then you have modern-day Iraq. And actually in the middle of it-ish is Baghdad, where the river Euphrates runs through that city. So it's actually not only on the other side of modern-day Jordan, it's halfway through Iraq, too. Why would they mention that? That's where Babylon used to be, basically. Babylon was a city on the Euphrates. This is where they went into exile. Why would they mention the river, the Euphrates, when they're describing the expansion and the territory of Israel? It's part of the promise. It was part of the promise that this was land that was going to be theirs if they followed God as they should. You can go back to Deuteronomy 11. Yeah?
This is connected to the Fertile Crescent.
Yes, this is the area of the world known as the Fertile Crescent. Yeah, having to do with the Tigris, Euphrates. There's rivers over there, and then between that and the Mediterranean. Yeah. Mhm.
Choice territory.
Yes, one of the best and most fertile lands in that general vicinity. Better certainly than the Arabian Peninsula, which is desert, the mountainous regions to the north. There's desert if you go down into Egypt, past the Nile. Yeah. Yeah, this is part of the promise in Deuteronomy 11. The land that they are promised, if they follow God, is that they will have territory from the Mediterranean to the Euphrates. but they never have it. They disobey. They fall away, they turn to other gods, and they fail to claim their full inheritance. This is what God had promised and wanted to establish for them, and in essence, they turned him down. Yeah. They are denied the full blessings of God, not because God is capricious or cruel, but because the people will not follow him. All right. I am nearly out of time. 12 is probably best understood as a rhetorical question. Now, they know why God has done this, why God has broken down their city, why they are in the peril that they are in. They have disobeyed. Right? They have turned away and followed other gods. They have not done what God has commanded them to do, and they are suffering consequently. They're suffering for their own sins. Why pick a boar in verse 13, though? It's an unclean animal, yeah. And I think that gets to the idea of what it is that's going on. That those who are unclean have come in from the outside and trampled through what is supposed to be reserved and held sacred. Yeah, I think specifically the use of the boar probably indicates the unclean nature of what is going on, that they are being, that is being defiled by forces from the outside. 14 is our petition. They ask for God to relent. They ask for him to act, to preserve the vine that he has established, and to restore Israel. This will not, spoiler alert, take place. The Assyrians will, in fact, conquer and destroy the northern kingdom. It's sad, really, reading this and knowing that that is going to happen. Again, it's possible to read this, depending on your dating of the psalm and so forth, as kind of a request that God will not allow this to happen in the south after having witnessed it in the north, in which case it does not fully happen. Though they are conquered and a portion are taken into exile, they will get restored. 15 is an interesting kind of translational question, and you'll see different translations, different versions of the Bible do this differently. The literal word here is son in 15. Figuratively, it can be read as bow. I just say a branch of a tree. And this is a common figurative interpretation of this, right? That the branching of a tree or the sprouting of something is a way to describe familial relations, right? We see that the idea, you see this with David, right? The root of Jesse and the branch that grows from it. This is a common descriptor and way of describing this in the Bible. So these words are used sometimes, I don't want to say interchangeably, but to mean similar sorts of things. And so sometimes you see the word son and it means more literally, or I should say, in a figurative sense, it means the bow. And in this case, because we have the root mentioned in the previous line of this particular verse, the parallelism that is common to the Psalms, a number of translations will do this not literally as son, but figuratively as bow. A branch coming off of the vine or the root. So it depends on which way you want to think about this, right? Whether this is better to read as son, in which case we might look at this as being somewhat prophetic, looking ahead, particularly as there are phrases in the next few verses as well, speaking of the Son of Man, whether or not this is going to be the Messiah that is mentioned here in 15 or not. Again, I couldn't find any clear consensus when I was looking at this, and so I don't know that I have much of a strong opinion. But it is an interesting kind of question, whether or not this specific part of it is intended to be prophetic. I think that there's enough here that in the last few verses of 80 that we can think of it as being, in some sense, forward-looking to the sort of promise that they have. I am past my... Were you... Okay. I don't want to miss anybody if they were headed. But I am past my time. I'm sorry I didn't quite get through the whole psalm here. But any last-minute questions, comments? I didn't leave time for complaints today. I'm sorry, but questions or comments, I can accommodate them if they're quick. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time and attention. Certainly your patience with me running a couple minutes past. We will pick up with Psalm 81 next week. Thank you very much.